everyone. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm Jean Chatzky, your host. I'm so glad that you're with me today, and you are in for a treat. My guest today is Richard Leider, and Richard is the founder of Inventure, the Purpose Company. He has 11 books, the latest of which is Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? The Path of Purposeful Aging. We are going to have a whole conversation about purpose with a man that Forbes magazine has called one of the top 5 most respected coaches in America today. He's also a contributing author to many coaching books. He's worked with 100,000 leaders from over 100 organizations, companies like AARP and Ameriprise, Habitat for Humanity, the Mayo Clinic. And he is with me today to talk about the role that purpose plays in our aging, and the role that purpose plays in our lives, and of course with our finances. And with that, I just want to say welcome to Richard. Welcome to Your Money Map. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Jean, what a privilege. I was really looking forward to this. I'm a big fan of your writing and your work, and so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, well, thank you. I am as well. Let me remind everybody who's watching and say hello to the people that are already chiming into the comments. Hi to Charles and Gerard and to Jim and anybody else who's out there watching. This is a dialogue. This is a conversation. We welcome you as part of it. If you have questions, if you have comments for Richard, who has so much knowledge that he is here to share with us, please just post them in the comments. I will weave them into the conversation. But let me start with this, Richard. It's an interesting title for a book. Who do you want to be when you grow old? It sounds like a question that we ask children, and yet you're asking it of people at all stages of life. Why this book right now?
Well, I think several reasons, but the question that many people, including maybe you, were asked as you were growing up is, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, now that you've grown up, how did that work out? And what's next? Because we've added 3 decades to life. In 1900, the average life expectancy in the US is 47. Now the fastest growing cohort is 85 and over. And so we've got demographics going for us with these 3 decades. We've got the pandemic and post-traumatic growth. Many people who were really confronted with not just aging, but with money and meaning and health and everything else during the pandemic. And then the third thing, which is it's the end of work as we know it. The economy has shifted in terms of how people make a living, and not 100% for everybody, but it's definitely changed. And as a result of that, people are re-looking at why they get up and do what they do in terms of work. So it's the end of work as we know it. So those 3 things, demographics, pandemic, and the changing work world, were the kind of the perfect storm for this book. And the subtitle of the book is The Path of Purposeful Aging, because I know we'll talk about this, but people are looking for, so I get it, but what do I do? And that's, so what's the path?
I think that's absolutely right. And you know me, we will definitely get tactical with this conversation.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
but tell me about the meaning of purposeful. When you say purposeful aging, does that mean thinking before you put one foot in front of the other? I mean, what's your definition?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that purpose is not a luxury. We know that now. The science of purpose is pretty clear that purpose is fundamental to health, to healing, to happiness, and ultimately even to longevity. People who have a reason to get up in the morning live 7 to 10 years longer. And so purpose is not a goal. Purpose is an aim. It's a mindset, an aim in life, and it is a practice. It's things we do. Purpose is a verb. It's what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so when we look at purpose, it's, there's kind of the big P purpose, which is like a cause or something. And then there's the little P purpose, which is what do I do every day in my own life? And so I've been a student, a researcher, and a writer about both big P and little P. And I'll just give an example to wind that up, Gene, and that is that my big P purpose is to help others unlock the power of purpose. That sounds pretty big, pretty noble. My little P purpose is make a difference in one person's life every day. Now that's different. That's a different kind of mindset, but both are important. And we all, everybody's an experiment of one, so we approach it in our own unique way.
How did you find your definition of purpose? Because you articulated both your big P purpose and your little p purpose in a sentence each. I think that is difficult to do, and I suspect that it might have taken you a while to get there. For those of us who are thinking, I don't know what my purpose is, I'm not sure. There are a lot of things I like to do. How do I narrow it down? What would you suggest?
Well, there's a universal purpose when you look at the research, and it's only 2 words: grow and give. So if you just start with a simple kind of a small p, how am I growing and giving? Because purpose is always beyond yourself. It's not a goal that's self-absorbed or just about yourself. It's about your connection, your contribution to life and to the world. So the starting point is, if it's too big, just start with grow and give. That's universal and pretty well researched. And so when we look at defining purpose, there's a whole lot of different ways to do it. But just think about this, Gene. There are 1,440 purpose moments in a day, minutes in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of those is a time when I can connect with somebody, to give them a hug, a kind word, listening, something that would be beyond self. And so some of the practices I want to share in a little bit are, how do you wake up every day with what am I here to do? What's the point of the why? Why is the big question. And I love what E.B. White, the American essayist, said, Gene. He said, I arise in the morning torn between a desire to save the world and a desire to savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. Well, oftentimes people, particularly like when you talk about retiring on purpose or something, they think, well, haven't I already saved? Can't I just savor? And the answer is sure. But how are you going to stay relevant? Because what I hear from people universally who are in the, I'll call it the retirement, certain age category, they still want to be relevant to their family, to their community, to others. And that's purpose. And so 1,440 purpose moments in the day, small p, doesn't mean you have to save the world. As E.B. White said, I arise in the morning to save and savor. This makes it hard to plan the day. I think it actually makes it easier to plan the day, because you can say, I want both. I want to save and savor, but not save in a, like save the planet. I just want to make my contribution.
You raised the issue of the pandemic as being one of the reasons that this book is so relevant right now. And I agree with you. I also think that the pandemic, the fact that we're not over it, that this variant is spreading, that the things are still very uncertain. And I wonder if that makes people feel as if they don't have time in their day to focus on purpose, that they're too busy. I mean, do you hear that? And if you do, how do you suggest that people find time for it?
Well, as I said, it's 1,440 purpose moments. It's just making a difference in one person's life a day. That would make it relevant. So one of the practices that I share with people, and I find at the end of a week that it's really a breakthrough, is to take a little Post-it and write that universal purpose statement, grow and give, on that Post-it and put it on their mirror. And when they wake up in the morning, ask themselves, what am I going to do today to make one difference in one person's life in terms of growing and giving? And at the end of the day, when they check in, there's a felt sense that this purpose thing isn't a big philosophical, conceptual thing. It's actually, purpose is a verb. It's an actual practice that you do. And when you do it, you feel better and you live longer and you're healthier and happier. And, when I did a PBS special a couple of years ago and it was shown in 400 cities across the country, I went to all these neuroscience labs. And I was already working with the American Academy of Neurology as a client, so I knew a lot of these folks. But I found that the science, that both faith and science agree that purpose is fundamental. It's not it's not a luxury. It's part of, I always say, Gene, that there's money, medicine, and meaning. We need money, and we're going to talk about that. We need medicine, meaning health. It's not literally pharmaceuticals, but health. And we also need meaning because people and you've interviewed people who have enough money and enough health but are unhappy. And people who don't have enough money but have meaning, or not enough money and medicine, have meaning and are happy. So we need all three. The point is, it's not just, I'm not arguing for one over the others. I'm saying we need meaning as well. We need a connectivity to life beyond just making a living and being healthy.
Yeah, Gerard says the purpose of life is to generate light. Light is awareness. Never stop learning, never stop giving. I think that's beautiful. Thank you, Gerard, for sharing
Yeah.
that.
That's beautiful. Beautiful,
Let's
Gerard.
talk about the money, Richard. Where does it fit in your search for purpose? How do we balance the desire to have enough money to live comfortably, to live in the way we want to live, to last as long as we do when we are lasting so much longer? How do we balance that with the quest for purpose?
Well, the starting point is like one of my colleagues has on his cell phone. When you get his voicemail, it says, "At the sound of the tone, please leave your answer to life's two eternal questions: who are you, and what do you want?" So the starting point before how much is enough is what do you want? And I co-authored before this book a bestseller with my co-author David Shapiro, and it's called Repacking Your Bags, Lighten Your Load for the Good Life. So the starting point is to define your vision of the good life, and then answer the question, so how much is enough? What do we need here? And so the good life, the way we defined it, I'm not sure how you would define it actually, but it's living in the place you love, with the people you love, doing the work you love with purpose. Now, money and health are the bookends for that. It's like, how do I financially and health-wise make that a reality? But the starting point with your financial planner and yourself and your partner or spouse or whomever is to define what it is you want, as instead of letting the world define it for you. There was always my financial planner, to be totally transparent, I spoke at his memorial service. He died, but he would always ask me in the early days. He would say, "Well, you need this number." And I said, "I don't need that number. What I need is, because I'm not going to retire. I'm going to do this, this, and this. How can you help me do that?" So we're all an experiment of one. But isolation is fatal. You need to share your vision of the good life with your financial planner, with your spouse and others, and then help you figure out how much is enough. So I don't know if that gets at exactly what you're talking about, but I think the starting point is inside out, not outside in.
I think you're totally right. When I wrote my last book, which was Women with Money, I started by asking people, what do you want?
Yeah.
Right? Hundreds of people, what do you want? Because unless and it was not always a material thing. It was not always a definition of life. Sometimes it was other dreams and other goals and visions. But you have to start with the picture first, the image first, and then only then can you put numbers to it. It doesn't work the other way around.
Yeah. But we aren't trained that way. It's kind of like in this book, this new book, the chapter that's got the most attention, that I guess not surprising, but kind of surprising, is how do I stop living a default life? So
What
a
does that
def
mean? What's a
a,
default life?
well, a default life is the life that you grew up with that was kind of expected of you, or because you lived here or had this education, or your parents would pay for this and not that. But I mean, when you're younger, you have certain realities that you uh, adhere to. But then at some point in life, you say, this isn't really working for me, or it is. And the midlife crisis, I mean, I've done a lot of writing and speaking about what used to be called the midlife crisis. Now we call it the late life crisis. But in the book, there's a whole chapter on are you having a late life crisis? But the point is that at a certain point, the default life might have worked. But now it's changing, particularly, as I said, the end of work as we know it. I mean, the default life for me was to get a job, have a family, do these things and retire. Well, that's not really my game plan, but it's also not a reality that my kids, it's like, really? I mean, that's not part of their script. So what is the new narrative? In 47 years ago, remember the book Passages?
Oh, of course, Gail Sheehy.
Yeah, well, that defined, and I was part of that, an apprentice to that study that she wrote about, the Harvard Study of Adult Development. But at that point, she defined and gave a whole new language and a whole new narrative to aging and to money and to medicine and meaning, the things we talked about. Well, now that we're living 3 decades longer, we need a new narrative. And that's what this book is trying to do, is to say that we now know that the happiest times of life are early in life and later in life. It's not a life of decline. It can be. I mean, obviously, as I said, everybody's an experiment of one. It can be a decline, but the reality is that people now have choices, and those choices can lead to actually an ascent as opposed to a descent, and where we can choose to be continually curious and courageous and relevant.
When we talk about the last part of life, and look, I get that. I mean, I'm in my 50s, and
Yeah, yeah,
my kids are just flown. Things have gotten a little bit easier, right?
yeah, yeah,
Their
yeah,
college is paid for. We're sort of through that.
yeah,
I get how the worry comes off of your plate a little bit, and
yeah.
things get a little bit easier. But then as we age, we start to worry about whether there will be enough money, whether there will be enough medicine or good health.
Yep.
What are your best tactics for preserving both, for making sure that you've got enough money to live the life that you want to live as long as you want to live it, and for making sure that you stay healthy?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of practices that we could talk about. The starting point is isolation is fatal. Don't go it alone, and that is have a kitchen cabinet or a sounding board, or people in your sphere that you can talk with and transparently look at your options and look at your real possibilities. And so I always think that people are well served, and I found this to be true in all the work I've done, to have a sounding board. And hopefully your financial planner is on a sounding board, not with their solution, but listening to what it is exactly that you want, so that they can help you get what you want and not project into it what they want. So our most precious currency is our time, as we know, as we get to a certain age, and we might have a breakdown of certain sorts. Sometimes we're pushed by pain to ask these questions, because of illness or deaths of people close to us, or jobs or divorces changing, and all of that. And sometimes we're pulled by possibility. We get to a point where, well, what is my real possibility? What can I do if I'm going to live 3 decades longer, and how am I going to afford to do that? So there's no simple, I'll say, simple solution or simple bullet for this. It requires reflection. It requires work, and that's what you're all about. And that's why I hold you in such high regard, because you're not willing to let people off the hook. They have to do, certainly you can just pitch them a solution, but that's not, everybody's an experiment of one. Everyone's different, and it's even different now than before, because there's a massive worldwide study called the U curve of happiness. and they look at that the midlife is a time when it's really the unhappiest time because there's so many pressures on and looking at the future, financial, work, relationship, parents, kids, and then how do we get out of this? Well, we have to work our way out of it. We can't just wish our way out of it. And that demands two things: asking what do we want, and then getting help, or having us, as I said, a sounding board or others in our camp.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're talking about a plan, right? An actionable plan. And I like
Right.
that you made the point earlier to include your spouse if you have one, because I've got to say the number of times that I have heard of partners, spouses who are at complete opposites as to
Right.
what they think the other one wants is just
Right. Yeah.
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Rachel says,
Yeah, the book Repacking Your Bags is sold over 1 million copies in 21 languages. And one of the things we learned early on in this was how many people who were partners or married or in a relationship had a different version of the good life going forward and hadn't talked about it. Didn't have a way to really talk about it. But that was the point: is a plan is not just like one person co-opting to the other. It's like, how do we have that conversation? And that's what you do. You help people like this have that conversation.
well, thank you so much. I want to bring some of our viewers into the conversation. Rachel says people are always asking her how to decide between the feeling of YOLO, you only live once, and saving for the future. I think that's an interesting one, right? We're totally pulled by today. Human beings are very today focused, not so much tomorrow focused. So how do you balance?
I wish I had a simple solution to that, but it often takes a crisis, as I said, pushed by pain, to say, whoops, what have I been doing here, or thinking about, or not thinking about? And so I think the key is to have a purpose partner, somebody who's transparent, who you can talk with, a committed listener to talk about it with, for sure. And so the other thing is that David Brooks talks about eulogy virtues versus resume virtues. And so many people are kind of today oriented on resume virtues because they have to. They have to make a living. As my friend and our mutual colleague Chris Farrell says, purpose and a paycheck. Mm-hmm. It's essential. I'm not naive about any of this, but the fact is that with eulogy, I do and have done memorial services for people. And if you've watched or looked at an obituary from somebody that is close to you, the first few things are like what we would call resume virtues: who they were, what they did, and how many kids they had. And then it gets into who they were and how they affected your life, which is really the ultimately the relational relevance part of our lives. And so how do you get to that point where you're paying attention to the eulogy virtues without a death sentence or without, something like that? Well, it comes in whole different forms. Sometimes it's age, sometimes it's circumstance, and sometimes it just happens because we have a fortuitous encounter with a great financial planner who asks the right question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. I think that there are a lot of people out there who haven't dipped a toe in the world of financial planning. And for me, I feel like my financial advisor is part advisor, certainly part number cruncher.
Yeah.
Also part therapist. When I'm not actively in therapy, it's a conversation that you don't have about what do you want unless somebody elicits it from you. And a good financial advisor will absolutely do that.
Yeah, we haven't been given that automatically. I hear all the time in writing this book, this book already went into reprint before it came out. That's how many. And the reason is because getting older is not a choice. We're all getting older, but growing older is a choice. And how do we make that choice without some sense of people that ask us good questions or our own curiosity or things like that? Otherwise, we might just stick with the default life, and at the end of our life, feeling like we kind of it didn't happen in certain ways. And so that whole shift from a default life, which, in the past, I have to say, a lot of financial planners, it's changed radically, but we're kind of default, like you just do this and you retire. Well, that is changing for a lot of us as we grow 3 decades older and everything. And so they need to be better, and we need to be better in having our team, really work with transparency, not with sort of default answers to tough questions.
I want to get to the tactical steps that we can take to bring more purpose to our
Right.
lives. But
Yep.
before I do that, 2 questions. First is from one of our viewers. This is a viewer on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and they're asking, how do you plan for unexpected life events such as a health issue? What have you found is helpful keeping you on track to do those purposeful goals with your money?
With your money, or with, I mean,
I would expand it. They
yeah,
asked with your money, but I think to accomplish those purposeful goals that you've set.
yeah. Well, I mean, having a plan is one thing, but actually having a team of people that you can talk with when things happen. Um, I co-authored a book called Life Reimagined, and the opening chapter in that book was, "This isn't what I was expecting." And so many people that we interviewed, hundreds of people, said, "I didn't expect my kids would be living with me. I didn't expect I'd have this health challenge. I didn't expect I'd be divorced in their mid to late life." And then the next chapter, the second chapter, was get real. And a lot of people said, "Well, get real. I don't have the money. I don't have the health or the wherewithal." And we said, getting real means simply that you have a process that you can work. And the
Mm-hmm.
process has several characteristics I want to share to answer this, and I'll do it as quickly as I can here. Number 1 is reflect. Number 2 is connect. Have a sounding board or someone you can talk with about your reflections and your thoughts. Number 3 is explore. Figure out a way to open some doors, to look at new options and not feel stuck. Number 4 is to choose and decide what doors you want to go a little more deeper in. Not easy. These are not easy things. And then number 5 is repack. I wrote a book called Repacking Your Bag. Repack means, what is it you need to let go of, and what is it you need to hang on to in order to remain relevant to your story and not somebody else's default story for you. And finally is to act, which is to make a move. And so having a mental model or a process and a team is one way to answer that question.
Okay. The other question that I have been just sitting on since you mentioned it about 10 minutes ago is, you said that the midlife crisis has become a later life crisis. Can you explain that, and why is that happening?
Well, the midlife crisis is one of, as I said, the toughest time of life is midlife. I mean, the research is quite amazing. And they call it the U curve of happiness. And there's a book about that, but there's a lot of mega research around the country, not just around the world, not just the US. So there's the midlife crisis, but the late life, that's more about achievement. And have I done, and I'm feeling stuck, or I've lost. The late life crisis is an existential crisis. We look in the mirror and say, that's why we call this book Who, Not What. Who do you want to be when you grow old? Who have you become? And it looks at that more of the who and the personal side of things. So in this book, there's a late life crisis quiz, which we found is being downloaded all over the place because people want to have a conversation about this, saying maybe it's not a crisis, but aging's not a disease.
No.
Aging is basically a design challenge, and I need to redesign because there's these. To finish that quickly here, Gene, there's 2 big shifts. The first shift is from adolescence to adulthood. The second big shift is from adulthood to elderhood. And the late life crisis is about the shift from adulthood to elderhood. And elderhood doesn't mean being classically like it means outgrowing adulthood and growing into a new phase of life, which is a new phase of life for many.
I I think that's kind of incredible, actually, and I've never heard it explained that way. It's optimistic, actually. It's not.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's a really. I'm going to dig in more to that. All right, tactics, Richard. Let's get tactical. We've been
yeah.
promising people tactics, so I want to bring purpose to my life. What are the steps that I need to take in order to create a purpose practice?
Okay. First of all, the linguistics here are, for me, unlocking, not discovering your purpose. Discovering means it's out there somewhere and I got to find it. Unlocking means it's in here and I have to figure out a way to unleash it or bring it forward. And so I always say, I call it the got a minute school of coaching, because people say, got a minute? Can you tell me I'm busy. I don't have time. Can you tell me what I should do with the rest of my life? So there's three things. Number one is, I call it the 2-minute practice. When you get up in the morning, before you get up and go to your cell phone or do anything else, ask yourself this: why am I getting up this morning? So the first thing is pause. Don't go for your technology. Second thing is to take 3 deep breaths. Now, that may seem like simplistic to your listeners, but it's not, because it grounds us, it centers us. So no technology, 3 deep breaths, and then ask yourself, what am I going to do to make a difference in one person's life today? So you kind of look at your calendar and say, oh, I got a call with my son today. I'm going to really step into that in a way like this. So the 2-minute practice, if you do it every day, informs your mindset in certain ways and starts to feel good and starts to feel natural, not something like some therapist told you to do this. The second thing is to do what I call the post-it challenge. I said earlier that the universal purpose is to grow and give. So if you take out a little post-it, a little sticky, and you put grow and give on that sticky and you put it on your mirror, tomorrow morning you ask yourself, how am I going to grow and give today? And at the end of the day, you ask yourself, how did I grow and give today? And so after 5 days, you will have a felt sense of what this purpose path feels like now. And you can name the purpose yourself rather than use my default purpose, which is to grow and give. And the third thing, it takes a little more time to do, but it's called the napkin test. And the napkin test came to me on a Delta Airlines flight when I used to fly all the time, and I did a PBS special, and people would sit next to me saying, oh, can you help me figure out what to do with the rest of my life? And I was saying, well, I've got something to do here, but take out this napkin and write this down. Gifts, G plus P plus V equals C. Gifts plus passions plus values equals calling. And calling is another word for purpose, more of a vocational look at it. But the question to ask yourself, and we could delve in a whole nother program on this, are you using your most enjoyed gifts on things you feel passionate or purposeful about in environments that fit your voice, that are healthy for you? If that's the case, you're on the purpose path and you'll figure it out along the way. So, but there's no way the perfect job or the ideal environment. You have to first of all look at what is it you want and then compare it with what you got.
And compare it with what you got, meaning your gifts. When you talk about your gifts, are your gifts the things that you're good at? Are your gifts the things that how do you define?
Great question. The four elements of a gift are: you love to do it. Think about what you love to do. Others observe you not only loving to do it, but you doing it effortlessly and somewhat superbly. Third, though, you can't remember learning it. If I'm in an audience of 1,000 people and I say, how many of you have brothers and sisters? 900 people will raise their hands that they have brothers and sisters. And I say, are your gifts the same as yours? Laughter. They'll say, no. When did you start to notice? Oh, when we were young, one was out selling lemonade and one was fixing lawnmowers and one was doing. And so I said, well, we all have gifts differing. We have to figure those out. And we weren't given the manual. We have to figure it out along the way. And sometimes in midlife or in later life, we start to say, what I love to do, I'm not doing. I need to
Mm.
figure out a way to do what I love to do. And if you're doing what you love to do, actually you make more money. Why? Because you're better at it and you're more effective and you're studying it. So something you love to do, others observe it, can't remember learning it. I don't know. It's always been there with me. Even when I developed a tool called calling cards, I actually interviewed parents, teachers, siblings, and they said, "Oh, Jean's always been this way. She was always a great listener," or whatever you would. And then the fourth thing is love learning more about it and practicing. So it's not something like you have to do it. It's like I love doing, or I enjoy and doing more about it. So even in retirement, there's a job, a career, and a calling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your job's done, maybe your career's done, but your calling is never done. You're always relevant by bringing your gifts to whether it's your grandkids or your community or your faith-based organization or life. And that's what makes you relevant all the way to the end.
Somebody told me once, if you're not sure what it is and I think it is what you're describing as a gift, if you're not sure what that thing that makes you special is, think back to when you were 11 and
Yeah,
what was it when you were 11 that lit you up?
right. Yeah.
I
No, that's
think,
good. That's
yeah.
good. And along the way, we learn through trial and error about ourselves. But the fact is that if in a let's say, how to find purpose in retirement is how to unlock those gifts for life, not just for a job to make money or et cetera. You don't have to do that, but you need to bring who you are to life on an ongoing basis to be living a happy and fulfilled life.
As we wrap up, I'm wondering, what's the connection between purpose and gratitude?
Oh, that's a great one. Well, compassion is the soul of purpose. Compassion is the soul of purpose, feeling connected in some ways. And I talked about eulogy virtues versus resume virtues in certain ways. And so really feeling, purpose, the one universal of my 5 decades of being a purpose ambassador, a purpose pioneer in this, is that it's always beyond yourself. But you don't have to save the world. You just have to feel relevant and connected in that world of yours in your own unique individual way. Everybody's an experiment of one. Be that experiment full out.
Richard Leider, what a conversation. I hope that you'll come back because I
I
think
want to.
100%
I
we
feel we
could
just got started. There's a whole lot of things we
exact.
could dig into here. But anyway, I really appreciate your questions are great. Your preparation is fantastic. Your team is great. So thank you for having the privilege of being with you.
Oh, my pleasure. And tell everyone who's listening where they can find more about you and your work.
Well, Richard Leider, Leider, richardleider.com. There's all kinds of everything on my website is free. Videos, downloads, the napkin tests I talked about, download, all of that's free. And the book, as I said, is taken off like a rocket ship, and but it's available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and your independent book uh, places.
And everybody
Thank you.
should hurry up and get that second printing before they have to rush it into a third. Thank
Yeah.
you for watching, everybody. For more information, of course, you can go to our website as well. It's protectedincome.org. For me, for the Alliance of Lifetime Income, we'll see you next time.